Hi, we're back to start chapter 26. The tornado. The weather forecast warned of possible tornadoes that day, but despite their scientific equipment, experts still couldn't predict exactly when or where a tornado would strike. So most farmers carried on with their usual tasks while keeping a watchful eye on their skies. Roz was out in the fields loading hay bales onto the flatbed truck as towering, puffy clouds rose from the south. Raindrops lightly tapped against her body and she thought nothing of it. The wind began to blow and still, the robot continued with her work. It wasn't until the first flash of lightning that Roz finally called it quits. She climbed onto the back of the truck and it automatically rolled across the hayfield toward the driveway. The storm developed quickly. Dark clouds started swirling and bulging downward, lower and lower, like a giant twisting finger pointing at the countryside, or a tornado was beginning to form. When the truck reached the driveway, Roz hollered, "Drive faster!" The engine revved, the tires kicked up the gravel, and the robot held on tight. The funnel cloud continued stretching downward. It brushed a tree line and leaves exploded into the air. Dust whirled around and around, rising higher with each spin. Then the tornado touched the ground. A siren sounded in the distance, but the tornado was growing noisier and angrier as it blew in from the fields, and the siren was quickly lost to the howling winds. The truck charged up the driveway and into a cluster of farm buildings. Roz looked ahead at the house and saw frightened faces in the window. "Go to the storm shelter!" she hollered in her loudest voice. Then she leaped off the truck and ran to help the Sharifs. Leaves and sticks flew sideways, whipping against the robot's body, knocking her off balance. Behind her, the farm buildings rattled and groaned. The milking parlor was shaking violently. With a long, terrible screech, its entire roof peeled off and sailed away on the wind. 4 blurry shapes appeared in the backyard. Mr. Sharif shielded his face and hobbled alongside the house toward the storm shelter. He threw open the door and waved everyone down the stairs. Oscar went first, then Jaya, but Jad wasn't moving. "Come on, Jad!" his father yelled. The boy stood still, shaggy hair flying everywhere, and stared up at the towering, twisting tornado. He used to have nightmares about tornadoes, but this was no nightmare. It was real, and it was getting close. The clouds swirled faster, the winds roared louder, the trees bent down to the ground. Jad suddenly felt strong arms around him, and Roz whisked him to safety. Mr. Sharif reached up from inside the shelter, desperately grasping for his son. And just when Roz thrust the boy into his father's arms, a blast of wind slammed a shelter door closed and swept our robot away. At first, Roz didn't realize she was in the tornado. She was expecting to fall back to the ground, but the wind only lifted her higher and higher. She saw the treetops, the rooftops, the faraway fields. More of the countryside came into view with each spin around the funnel cloud. Our robot's survival instincts were blaring in her head, urging her to protect herself. But what could she do? The tornado was in control. The winds whirled her up and around and down. Roz could almost imagine what it was like to fly, and she thought of Brightbell. It seemed what to be her final moments would be spent in her son's airborne world. Roz wasn't the only thing swept away in the storm. Dust, gravel, leaves, branches, fence posts, and farm equipment were all swirling around her. The robot was pelted by flying objects, big and small. She never even saw the shovel coming. The heavy tool wheeled around the tornado and clang! It hit the back of her head. Everything suddenly went dark while Roz was still up in the sky. Chapter 27 is called The Broken Robot. The Sharifs found their robot powered off, lying in a ditch by the road. Her left leg was crumpled beneath her torso, her right arm was twisted around a tree trunk, and her whole body was covered in new scrapes and dents. Together, the family heaved Roz onto the bed of the pickup truck where Oscar was waiting. The dog sniffed her broken body while the Sharifs climbed in beside him. Then Rambler turned around. The road was littered with debris from the storm, and the truck had to drive slowly. As they bounced along, Jad pressed the button on the back of Roz's head. She powered up, and her garbled voice automatically said, "Hello, I am Rozum. Unit 7134, but you may call me Roz. Oscar licked the poor robot's face and Jad leaned in close. Roz, can you hear me? Are you okay? Hello, Jad. I have broken limbs and minor damage to my computer brain. My systems are now repairing themselves. Please stand by. The robot's glowing eyes pulsed as her recovery program did its job, and long before, Roz sounded like her old self. My computer brain is now fully functional. Jad wrapped his arms around the robot and sobbed. I'm so sorry, Roz. It's my fault the tornado got you. Please don't be mad. Now Jaya was crying too. She pulled her brother and her dog and her robot into a big hug. Mr. Sharif wasn't much of a hugger, but he reached over and laid his hand on Roz's shoulder. They stayed like that for some time, quietly holding on to one another. The shock of the tornado was fresh, and it felt good to be together. Mr. Sharif, I apologize for leaving the farm without your permission, said the robot. The man smiled. No need to apologize, Roz. I'm just glad you're alive. How are the cows? Said Roz. Farm's a mess, but the cows are fine, said Mr. Sharif. We'll take you up to the repair shop right now, and you'll be with the herd again soon. Chapter 28 is called The Shop. It was a small, sleepy farm town. A few trucks glided down the streets. A few humans sat on porches. A few stores lined the main square. Rambler parked in front of a bright white building. Then, Mr. Sharif let the children with Roz, and he limped inside. Welcome to the tech lab shop, said a woman in a white suit. My name's Nadine. How can I help you? Mr. Sharif was distracted by all the robots on display in the shop. They came in a dazzling variety of designs and sizes and colors. Standing still, eyes glowing, they calmly waited for someone to put them to work. When a man spotted Rozum Unit, he suddenly remembered why he was there. I'm the owner of Hilltop Farm, he said, and we were just hit by a tornado. I heard the siren, said Nadine. Is everyone okay? My family's okay, but I've got a Rozum Unit outside who's in bad shape. The woman called over her shoulder, Patch, bring the Rozum repair kit. A robot marched into the room carrying a large case. He looked similar to a Rozum robot, but he was shorter and wider. The word Patch was lightly etched on his torso. Mr. Sharif led Nadine and Patch out to the truck where the children were chatting with their robotic friend. Patch quickly scanned Roz's broken body and announced the cost of the repairs. The man stroked his chin, mulling over his options until the children blurted out, Just fix her! Mr. Sharif nodded and Patch sprang into action. With smooth, precise movements, the robot gently placed Roz on the ground. Then he grasped her broken arm and her broken leg and twisted. There was a thwip sound as each limb popped loose. Then he took the new limbs from the case and thwip, popped them back into place. In a matter of seconds, Roz was whole and back on her feet. Robots never cease to amaze me, said Mr. Sharif, admiring Roz's new, shiny limbs. The makers really outdid themselves with those Rozum units, said Nadine. However, you have our most basic unit. Would you like us to upgrade her software? Or adjust her settings? Or polish out some of these scratches? Will that cost extra? Nadine smiled. I'm afraid so. This basic unit is fine then, said Mr. Sharif, but I need to order a work crew. Could you send one over to fix up my farm? Not a problem, said Nadine. I'll send a crew over immediately.